So one thing that comes to mind that I believe is obviously one of many, but a great reason for that transformation from the Christian underpinnings of the foundation of this country in the West to what we have now. I think a big part of that was a consequence of actually the idea of separating church and state. And so, America was called this great experiment, right? Because it really was an experiment. It was, we're going to try something radically different from pretty much the rest of the world and the rest of humankind that we've done up to this point, which is that, hierarchy of kingship and kingdoms. And we're going to totally invert that so that the people at the bottom now are actually ruling, so to speak, right? So that was the experiment.
Yes.
And part of that experiment was to totally transform what that ruling body over the people looked like. And traditionally in the West, particularly the Christian West after Christianity, but even before Christianity, you had moral authority of the religion, the dominant religion, being part of that ruling body, right? So that was the union of church and state, right? So like in the Western Roman Empire, you had bishops or popes crowning kings, right? And participating in politics in almost a very direct way.
Yeah.
And so the American experiment was a reaction to that, was we're gonna totally cleave that and try something different. However, I obviously, as an Eastern Orthodox, I prefer the Byzantine model, where it's, as if you're familiar with the Byzantine logo, it's a two-headed eagle, right? So it's two heads of the same body. One of them is church, one of them is state, right? And so they're not one and the same, but they almost act as checks and balances between each other. So the church represents the moral authority of the country, and the government represents the physical authority, right? Or the legitimization of power and force, as philosophers would say. And so in that model, the government, as the holder and monopolizer of force and power, is beholden to the moral authority of the church. So the emperor, the czar, whatever, the head of state, his spiritual father is the bishop, is the spiritual head of the church in that, empire region. So he's beholden to a spiritual father. Like he confesses, he participates in liturgical worship just like everyone else, right? He's part of the same body of Christ.
Yeah.
And when you have leaders that are subject to the body of Christ, and of course, then, by extension, God, there's more trust in their behavior as being informed of a worldview that is beyond earthly, right? That is heavenly. As St. John Chrysostom says, like, kingship actually is the greatest, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, it's the greatest form of government, because it models the heavenly government, which is a kingdom, right? Christ is the king. But what kind of king is Christ? He's not a king that sucks the blood and money and sweat of his people to enrich himself at the top. He's the king that descends from his throne and gives himself up, his own body, to his people, literally to the point where we're consuming him via communion and the sacrament of communion, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is when you separate church and state, when you step away from that idea, ultimately over time, the state is going to dominate the church, because the church doesn't have use of force, doesn't have physical power.
Yeah.
Right? It has moral power, but it doesn't have physical power. So the state, having the physical power, can strong arm the church to control it. This is what we saw with COVID, right? So, obviously there were churches, many Orthodox churches, many Catholic churches, that didn't listen to the shutdown orders, but the majority did, right?
Yeah.
So that was a reflection that the state actually is in control.
Yes.
And in doing so, the state kind of supplants the church and becomes also the moral authority.